Your right hand and follow after me. Ako,
Si Benigno Aquino III,
mataimtim kong pinanunumpaan,
ay taimtim kong pinanunumpaan,
natutuparin ko ng buong katapatan
natutuparin ko ng buong katapatan
at sigasig ang aking mga tungkulin
at sigasig ang aking mga tungkulin
bilang Pangulo ng Pilipinas.
bilang Pangulo ng Pilipinas.
Kasihan nawa ako ng Diyos.
Kasi ano ako ng Diyos.
Congratulations.
Maraming salamat po. Thank you.
Sa tamang pamamahala, gaganda ang buhay ng lahat. At sa buhay na maganda, sino pa ang gugustuhin bumalik sa panahon ng pang-aapi? Kung kasama ko kayo, may tataguyod natin ang isang bayan kung saan pantay-pantay ang pagkakataon. Dahil pantay-pantay nating ginagampanan ang ating mga pananagutan. Ang bawat isa sa atin ay nanindigan sa presinto. Bumoto tayo ayon sa ating karapatan at konsensya. Hindi tayo umatras sa tungkulin nating ipaglaban ang karapatan ito. Dahil dito, taas tumuli ang Pilipino. Tayong lahat ay kabilang sa isang bansa kung saan maaari ng mangarap muli. Walang lamangan, walang padrino at walang pagnanakaw. Walang wangwang, walang counterflow, walang tone. Kayo ang boss ko. Kaya't hindi maaaring hindi ako makinig sa mga utos ninyo.
From daang matuwid, walang wangwang to kayo ang boss ko. With these words, former President Benigno Aquino III made good governance and the fight against corruption the cornerstones of his presidency. 5 years after exiting the palace, the country is now mourning his passing.
At 6:30 in the morning today, Pinoy died peacefully in his sleep after having been hospitalized constantly for more than a year. He succumbed to renal disease secondary to diabetes. He was 61. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Robbie Alampayo watching The Big Story. A nation in mourning this Thursday, former President Benigno Noynoy Aquino III joined our creator today. He was 61.
Let's get the latest details from Pat Mangune, who is joining us live from Heritage Park in Taguig. Pat, we're sending our deepest condolences to the family of former President Noynoy. What do we know so far?
Robbie, Gretchen, the Aquino family has confirmed that kidney complications due to diabetes was the cause of death of the former President Noynoy Aquino. Kind words and condolences have since been pouring out through the day, with the news coming as a shock to most. Former President Benigno Noynoy Aquino III was rushed to the Capital Medical Center in Quezon City earlier this morning. By 6:30 a.m., he passed away due to renal disease secondary to diabetes.
It is with profound grief that on behalf of our family, I am confirming that our brother, Benigno Noynoy S. Aquino III, died peacefully in his sleep.
His older sister, Pinky, says he has not been in good shape even before the pandemic. The Aquino family thanked the people who took care of Pinoy at home for the last 3 years.
Pribado po siyang tao. Bago pa man ang pandemic, labas-pasok na po siya sa ospital.
Despite grieving, the Aquino family says they're comforted now that he lies in peace with their parents.
Lahat ng kasama niya sa Times Street na mula nung pandemic, bihirang nag-o-off dahil alam nila delikado para sa kanya. Salamat.
Other relatives and family friends of the Cojuangco and Aquino family also sent their condolences.
No words can express how broken our hearts are and how long it will take for us to accept the reality that he is gone. Mission accomplished, Kanoy. Be happy now with Dad and Mom.
Alam kong meron siyang condition, pero I never thought that it was something like this.
When I was young, he was my karate instructor. Yeah, people don't know that he's a black belter in karate. And ano siya, parang he's always concerned about his fellow men.
Nakatext ko siya nung isang araw at sabi nga niya sana pabisita ko siya. That was Sunday. Hindi umabot yung pagbisita ko. And I hope today, maalala natin siya, no? We remember lahat ng mga nagawa niya para sa ating bayan, na binigay niya lahat.
The president was a brave man. He ran after the powerful. Even to his credit, but he was always fair. And he always let justice prevail. He earned international respect. And I hope we can try to gain that respect again.
Friends in government also paid a visit to the late president, whose remains were brought to the Heritage Park in Taguig. Former DILG Secretary Mar Rojas and Liberal Party President Senator Kiko Pangilinan dropped by the Capitol Medical Center. So did former Energy Secretary Rene Almendras and former Foreign Affairs Secretary Albert Del Rosario. Vice President Leni Robredo also visited Pinoy at the Heritage Park. Robbie, Gretchen, around 7:30 this evening, Chris Aquino announced or updated the media that the remains of her brother have already been cremated. And tomorrow, his ashes will be brought to the Ateneo de Manila University because, as we all know, the former president is a true blue Atenean. And on Saturday, Chris Aquino also mentioned that his ashes or his remains will be buried alongside their parents at the Manila Memorial Park in Sucat, Parañaque. Meanwhile, there will be no necrological services at the Malacanang Palace, where Aquino took office for the last 6 years from 2010 to 2016. Robbie, Gretchen?
Maraming salamat, Pat Mangune. Now joining us tonight is one of Pinoy's former colleagues at the Senate and his own presidential assistant for food security and agricultural modernization, Senator Kiko Pangilinan. Senator Kiko, welcome to The Big Story.
Thank you for having us, Robbie, Gretchen, magandang gabi.
Senator, this was clearly a shock, a surprise to the nation, but for people like you and for the people closest to the former president, how long were you aware of his condition and what he was going through?
Well, we were aware that he was not well. In fact, before COVID, he was already rushed to the ER, stayed at the ICU. So we knew he was ill, and we were aware that he was going through the dialysis. But I didn't expect that it would come to this today. We were all praying and hoping that he would be able to survive this, regain his strength, recover and regain his strength. So yes, we were shocked to learn about the news before 9 o'clock this morning.
Sabi po ng mga kapatid niya, you can rest well, mission accomplished. Senator, how would you frame and remind the public about what that mission was for Pinoy?
Well, he committed to addressing corruption, and he followed through on that in terms of jailing those involved in corrupt practices. He committed to addressing poverty, and by the end of his term, 7 million Filipinos went from poor to non-poor. He committed to good governance, and at the beginning of his term, the infra budget, for example, was 165 billion, and by the end of his term, it was close to 5 times more, almost 800 billion. And of course, the 6.2% growth average for 6 years. So he pretty much did his best and achieved quite a number of milestones, unprecedented growth during his 6 years as leader of the country. So I hope, despite the fake news, despite the demonization and the maligning and the demolition that he faced after he stepped down, that in the long run people will realize that mabuti siyang tao, marami siyang natulungan, maraming buhay ang naisalba sa kahirapan at tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang kanyang ilang sa mga simulain niya.
Maraming salamat po, Senator Kiko Pangilinan, and we will continue this conversation about the legacy of Pinoy immediately after the big story on the Chiefs. For now, President Noynoy Aquino left Malacanang in 2016 with the highest satisfaction rating among all past chief executives. Tonight's big number, 29%. That was his net satisfaction rating in the second quarter of 2016, according to an SWS survey. While it's lower than the 60% ratings he had when he began his term, it was still better than how his predecessors fared. President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo had a minus 17. President Joseph Estrada was at plus 9, while President Fidel Ramos had a plus 19.
These are the other big stories tonight. Several of the country's leaders, both past and present, pay their respects to former President Noynoy Aquino. A number of Filipinos also grieve his passing. Government offices, including the palace, lowered the Philippine flag at half-mast in honor of the late former president. And the 12 young Gilas players who will compete in the Olympic qualifying tournament have finally been named. These big stories after the break.
Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. Following the announcement of the death of former President Aquino, a wave of messages poured in for the late chief executive and his family. Officials and allies of Aquino honored his contributions to the country. Marian Enriquez has this report.
Simple, incorruptible, and honest. This is how friends and allies describe former President Noynoy Aquino. Vice President Leni Robredo recalled how Pinoy stood by her side when she lost her husband, former Interior Secretary Jesse Robredo. But what stayed with her the most were the small things, which showed his love for the country.
In one of his State of the Nation addresses, he stated, "Hanggat nagsisilbi tayong lakas ng isa't isa, patuloy nating mapapatunayan na the Filipino is worth dying for. The Filipino is worth living for. At idadagdag ko naman po, the Filipino is definitely worth fighting for."
Former spokesman and friend Edwin Lacerda recalled the first order from the former president, the anti-wangwang policy.
He really wanted to show an example of obedience no matter what station you are in government. So he set an example, and that's what people were saying, that he was a servant leader.
Former Senator Bam Aquino's heart is broken over his cousin's passing. He witnessed how Noynoy gave all his effort and time for the Filipinos. Sorsogon Governor Cheese Escudero, a close friend of Pinoy, was also saddened.
Hindi ko siya makakalimutan at hindi rin siya makakalimutan ng sambayanang pinagsilbihan niya nung siya'y Pangulo ng ating bansa. Rest in peace, my friend.
Albay 2nd District Representative Joey Salceda remembered Aquino's fiscal policy and socio-economic programs that benefited around 7.7 million Filipinos.
Sa poverty reduction, I already mentioned, but it is 4 Ps. From 5 billion, increased it to almost 70 billion. From 800,000 to almost 4.5 million families.
Bangsamoro Transition Authority Parliament Deputy Speaker Zia Alonto Adyong lauded Pinoy for advocating peace in Bangsamoro by creating the Bangsamoro Transition Commission. And despite the long, bitter history between their families, Senator Amy Marcos said that she will always remember Noynoy as a kind and simple soul beyond politics and much public acrimony. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
The masses are just as shocked over the sudden passing of Pinoy. Some even went to the hospital hoping to catch a glimpse of the late president. Mobile journalist Stanley Gahete gives us a front seat to the story.
Former President Benigno Noynoy Aquino, the 15th President of the Republic of the Philippines and the son of the country's two democratic icons, died this morning in a hospital in Quezon City. The news shocked Filipinos and many went to the Capital Medical Center in Quezon City where Noynoy was rushed early morning Thursday. Among them were Guy Begnotea and Virginia De Vera.
Kahit sabihin pa natin na anumang kulay, di ba? Nakakagulat. Isang haligiran ng ating bansa.
Okay na presidente si Noynoy kumpara sa akin.
Aquino quietly returned to an ordinary life when his term ended in 2016, rarely appearing in public. Although there had been rumors about his failing health, the public is completely unaware of it.
Wala naman kami nababalitang may sakit siya eh. Although noon, kasi namayat siya, di ba?
Marilyn was also attempting to do a live report video on Facebook on what she observed around the hospital.
Tumakbo kami dito para makita man lang masilayan siya. Siya lang ang pinunta namin.
An owner of a sari-sari store near the hospital expressed surprise after she heard the news.
Siyempre lahat ng tao na nakakarinig na kinikilabutan, nabibigla.
Pinoy's record as a leader was unmatched in terms of the economy. He fought against the corruption and was known for his daang matuwid. He served the people well with his slogan, "Kayo ang boss ko," and was totally against officials using sirens to escape traffic. In 2013, Time named him as one of the 100 most influential people in the world.
Nakikidalamhati po kami sa pamilya Aquino.
I am Stanley Gahete and we are One News.
During his term, Pinoy worked to transform the Philippines from being the sick man of Asia to a rising tiger. GDP grew at an average of 6.2% during his term, twice exceeding 7%. That was the fastest since the 70s. The country also won its first investment-grade credit rating. Inflation was kept in check at a low of 1.4%. The BPO sector also expanded during his leadership. The Philippines climbed 40 spots in the Global Competitiveness Index. And with programs centered on battling corruption, the Philippines rose 49 places in Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. Pinoy was also known as the president who brought China to court after the Philippines filed an arbitration case against China for seizing control of Scarborough Shoal. The International Tribunal in The Hague ruled in favor of the Philippines in July 2016, a month after Noynoy's term ended.
And now for the big story in sports. Gilas Pilipinas has released the names of the 12 players who will be flying to Serbia today for the Olympic qualifying tournament. Dwight Ramos leads the 12-man roster alongside naturalized center Ange Kwame and team captain Isaac Go. Kai Soto joins Kwame in the tall center rotation with bigs Gio Chu, Carl Tamayo, and Justin Baltazar. Will Navarro, Mike Nieto, SJ Belangel, RJ Abarientos, and Jordan Heading round out the team. Gilas is set to face host nations Serbia and the Dominican Republic. Time for another quick break. When we return, we continue our coverage of the passing of former President Noynoy Aquino. Flags across the country were lowered in honor of the former chief executive. More details after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. Like his mother before him, Pinoy's death comes at a time when the country is just a year away from electing a new president. Will Noynoy's legacy galvanize the opposition to victory in the 2022 elections? Let's find out in this report by Mian Los Baños.
It was August 21, 1983 when former Senator Ninoy Aquino died after being shot in the head when he arrived from exile at the Manila International Airport. His assassination outraged the opposition, eventually sparking the 1986 People Power Revolution. This ultimately ousted former dictator Ferdinand Marcos and placed Ninoy's wife Cory Aquino at the Malacanang. In 2009, former President Cory Aquino lost her life to cancer. Her death prompted calls for her only son, then Senator Noynoy Aquino, to run for president in the 2010 polls. Political analyst Lindo Manhit said the timing was perfect.
She was seen as the image of what government officials ought to be. At dun sumakay sa popularidad na yon si Pangulong Noynoy.
Is this a pattern in the country's political history when the death of a political figure spurs a relative's victory, like in the case of former DILG Secretary Jesse Robredo, husband of Vice President Leni Robredo?
Necropolitics.
Ano yun?
Oo. Ito yung yung phenomenon, the dead person has a good legacy. Nagra-rub off sa anyone from the family.
And with Pinoy's death happening before the 2022 polls, will his legacy rub off on the opposition? For Manhit, Aquino's good track record might have been diminished by misinformation post-presidency.
Yung achievement niya, pinalalabas pa na, panahon naman ni Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo yun. Which is a great disservice to a good administration. No?
But with no Aquino to lead the opposition, political analyst Dennis Coronacion said the party can use the time to remind Filipinos of the Pinoy brand of politics.
Pwede nilang gamitin yung imahe, yung magandang imahe ni Pinoy. Oo, na they can tell the voters na kung ano man ang plataforma ng dating Pangulo, yun rin ang nais nila sundan. So, if it's about clean government, no corruption.
What's clear for experts, now is not the time for the opposition to be silent. Reporting for News 5, Mian Los Baños, we are One News.
Flags in different government offices, agencies, and LGUs were put on half-mast today in honor of the late President Noynoy Aquino. This includes both chambers of Congress, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. The Philippine National Police likewise paid its respects to former President Noynoy. The cities of Manila and Davao also flew their respective Philippine flags at half-mast to express mourning over Pinoy's passing. All flags in Malacanang also flew at half-mast earlier this afternoon.
Other parts of the world joined in the mourning for the death of Pinoy. United States Embassy Chargé d'Affaires John Law said they will always be thankful for the partnership between Washington and Manila under Pinoy's term. The European Union reminisced of fond memories of Pinoy's visit to Brussels in 2014. The EU said it is mourning a friend who pushed for deeper relations. Germany also remembered Pinoy as a great friend whose official state visit in September 2014 marked an important milestone in intensifying German-Philippine relations.
Mga boss, aminin ko, ni minsan po, hindi ko sinabing ako po'y perfecto. Ginawa ko ang
Former President Noynoy has been known for delivering his state address in the native language, Tagalog or Filipino, and for the popular quip, "Kayo ang boss ko."
True to his style, he reiterates the honor of serving the Filipino people in his last State of the Nation address. Let's listen in.
mga boss, aminin ko, ni minsan po, hindi ko sinabing ako po'y perfecto. Ginawa ko ang lahat upang iwanang mas makatarungan, mas maunlad at tumatamasa ng makabuluhang pagbabago ang ating bansa. Hayaan ko na pong kasaysayan ang humusga.
Filipino nation turns today, passing of the 15th president of the Philippines. Any fond memories you've had with
Well, a lot of memories, of course. And syempre, si Pinoy, inunahan niya na tayong lahat in saying, hindi ako perpekto. At sinabi niya nga, kasaysayan na maghuhulgas sa akin. But if you look at how people are reflecting on social media, kita mo, this is a conversation. We're just starting this conversation to remember this man. He was a very complicated man with a very complicated life. Obviously, a lot of people loved him and appreciated his sacrifice. He did not want to become president. On the other hand, marami ring batikos sa kanya. And these are some of the things na in the coming days we will discuss. And I think it's a conversation that Pinoy himself would not only have welcomed, he would encourage it.
And I was actually this morning learning the news. I was struck by it. I mean, reminded how life is so short. No, he was 61 years old, and he didn't really talk much about his illness, and he was quietly. So it's a reminder for all of us to appreciate the people around us, and again, we send our deepest condolences to the Aquino family.
And like I said, we will continue this conversation. It will be a discussion that will continue. In fact, immediately after this, we will be bringing in some of the people who knew him better than a lot of us. That will be on the Chiefs. Subaybayan niyo po immediately after the big story.
Well, that wraps up today's big story, and catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Hall. We are One News. Have a good evening.
He lost a lot of weight.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He was something like 105.
Yeah, mga 100 pounds daw. And he's diabetic.
Because